Welcome back to Rocky Mountain Residential, a podcast for MCM Collective. I'm Kelly McBartlett, and today's a founders episode. That hasn't happened in a long time.
Great. Yeah, it's fun for us to get together and do a podcast together.
You all should introduce yourselves.
I'm Christine Cavalier.
And I'm Blake McBartlett.
And today we're talking about a fun topic, AI and technology in real estate. So I know that this has come up with us recently with different clients that have been using AI tools. In fact, you and I were having a conversation, like a month ago maybe, about a client that was using it for their inspection, right?
Yeah, so he took the inspection report and fed it into an AI tool to find out what recommendations he thought he should be asking for, which was the first time I'd seen AI being used that way. So it was, it caught me a little bit off guard. But it was interesting for sure.
And it led us to this topic of kind of delving into everything going on with AI. It's huge everywhere in every industry, but we're seeing it pop up in ways like this in real estate too. So we'll delve into that inspection report in a little bit. But before that, what other ways is everybody seeing this used? What's popping up?
Well, I feel like people often say it's new to our industry, but I feel like the first really integration that we saw was Zestimate.
Yeah.
Right.
Was kind of the first use of like AI information and really around valuation.
Right.
And I feel like that kind of became a thing, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. I felt like people started to really watch that. Would you agree, or is it even longer than that?
Longer ago.
Longer. I mean,
Yeah.
I think Zestimate probably came out maybe even like 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Yeah.
I think you're right in that, like, people really started latching on to Zestimates maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, where it's almost now everybody just checks what's your Zestimate, right? Even though there's other models out there.
Yeah.
Lots of other models.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. When it comes to that, it's interesting. Zestimates are like an algorithm. They use a lot of conglomerate data, to come up with those values. Blake, I know that you teach a class at CSU on appraisal.
Yeah.
Does this come up in your class at all?
It does. So we do a lot of pricing strategy every week for the course that's on appraisals. We usually do residential only, which is nice for just learning purposes for me and how people are using it. And I always have them like look at the property for like 60 seconds online and give me a value. And I would say 9 times out of 10, the value used is a Zestimate tool from like realtor.com, Zillow, or like Redfin has a pretty good valuation, like easy access to see. And it's everyone's like first guess right from the very beginning. And I work on the front end and like pre-pick the properties, and I look at that first to see if it's actually good value. And I would say 9 times out of 10, the Zestimate value is off between like 25 to 35% based on the property that I'm in. I always pick properties at the edge of a neighborhood, or like on a busy street or off a busy street, or like in a really diverse square footage, home price, to really throw it off, because all that is really just using a data algorithm for the neighborhood and like applying an average price per square foot and like slapping on a price tag. And that's really what they do, but there's so much more to pricing than just square footage.
Oh, dramatically. There are a lot more.
Yeah. So I feel like in neighborhoods like Old Town specifically, where it's just like so diverse in terms of like single family homes next to like big high-end residential properties like the one we're in today, that skews the data so significantly that it just doesn't even make sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it seems like, when we look at Zestimates in our area, but also if you look at it across the nation, the more data that's similar, so like if it's a production builder neighborhood that has very similar floor plans, all built about the same square footage and within the same time frame, sometimes that Zestimate can be pretty accurate.
Right.
The market changes quickly, though, and it can be thrown off based on that market. But you're right, when there's nuances, like especially as properties age, and in a condo building, if one condo is remodeled and most of them are not, the value can be thrown off dramatically. So, I feel like I'm always telling people, my clients, use it as a good first step. And then ultimately, let's verify that together. Well, what do you two tell clients about Zestimate?
I say something very similar. Like it's a good kind of starting point. And then that same conversation of the data is based on aggregate average data. And when you're looking at a property that isn't the average. Either it's better than the average or worse than the average. Pricing is going to be so much different. I think the other thing in our area too that might not be true across the country is with basements, right? So any of those algorithms have no idea how to differentiate what the square footage is below grade and if it's finished or not, and above grade and how that is different. And then other things in our area which come into play a lot are views, right? And so there are a lot of properties within a same neighborhood that have no view and then one that does. And so the algorithms can't take those things into account. So I have that conversation with the clients and say, yeah, it's a good starting point. And to your point also, if it's a neighborhood that I think we say production build, I think how most lay people think of it is like cookie cutter. I hear that word a lot. Like if it's a cookie cutter neighborhood, the algorithms are much more accurate because there's not very much differentiation. But yeah, then really delving into the work that we do and appraisers do to figure out how do you compare these properties and come up with a more accurate valuation and pricing.
So when it comes to that with clients, I don't know if you two have had this experience either with students or clients you work with, Blake, or you with clients you work with, Christine, where somebody is really attached to that first number that they saw on a Zestimate, whether they're negotiating on a buy side or a seller that's really connected to a price that isn't realistic. What do you do with that situation? What do you tell your students? What do you tell your clients?
I always pull comps and kind of give a summary about why. I feel like these happen most often when there's not a lot of recent sales in the neighborhoods, like coveted communities and like across northern Colorado, like they don't turn often. And when they do, it's like a one-off sell. And usually this estimate's like a lot lower because there's not comparable sales like really close to the property. So I feel like more oftentimes than not, estimates are lower for like more high-end coveted communities than too high. So people are like, well, it's not worth that because Zillow says it's worth this. And I'm like, well, did you look at the history? Because once it hit the market, it jumped from like 450 to like 900 and it's listed for 1.1. So what happened in 30 days on Zillow for the price to justify that, like that big gap? And I'm like, it hit the market. So now this is in the data set for the Zestimate. But look at all these other homes that haven't sold but have also appreciated. And I just you have to tell a story to really explain the why behind it. That's kind of what I do. But I would say 9 times out of 10, it's usually buyers saying it's not worth the list price.
Yeah, I do. Because you're talking about you're teaching an appraisal class now, and I've taken several appraisal classes, and that's a tool that I use is an appraisal spreadsheet tool, and then put the current data that we have, trying to find the best comp. So, hand picking the comparable sales that are most similar to the property that we're looking at, rather than aggregating data from a geography, because the algorithms tend to use geographical information more so than like kind. And so I talk to them and put that data into an appraisal spreadsheet and do calculations on that, and then show them, here's, an actual hand-done valuation using much better data set than aggregate information. That's how I usually approach it. How do you do it?
Yeah, I think similarly to what both of you said, kind of telling that story and doing a market analysis, and then even jumping on the phone and talking them through each listing that we're using as a comparable and why we're using it as a comparable is super important, so that they can understand.
Right.
Like you both said, the Zestimate and these algorithms are based on large data sets that don't take into consideration a lot of the floor plans that might create a different value, or views, or whatever else it might be. And so I think exactly what you're saying, just telling the story and being sure to help them understand why there might be differences. So, in today's market, that may not mean that there's still not room for negotiation if you're on the buy side, but maybe that 30% difference is really not realistic as they might think it could be. So,
Right.
yeah. So, moving off of Zestimates and the automated valuation models, which we see a lot, that was kind of the first AI in our industry. there's a lot of AI in our industry now, and a lot that our industry is actually not pushing out to the consumer, but the consumers are taking advantage of on their own. And I've seen this a lot where people are making AI so much a part of their daily lives where they're almost asking AI for assistance in evaluating the world multiple times a day. So this kind of leads us to your experience with the inspection.
Right.
Give us a summary of what that looked like and what interesting things you learned in that process.
Yeah. So, like I had mentioned at the beginning, my client said, "Oh, hey, I have a summary of the inspection report, and here's all the things I want to ask for," which was new for me because usually the way that I work with my clients on inspection is the inspection happens, the report is generated, the client looks at the report, I look at the report, we set a meeting to discuss like, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Client, what are the things what have you noticed in the report that you would like to have addressed? Let's talk about those. Let's look at them in the grand scheme of things versus, like how much you've paid for the property, all those things you take into account and have a big, long discussion about what's important, what's not, what they can live with, what they can't live with. And when I got on this meeting, he's like, okay, here's everything. It's all in this nice little bow package. This is what we want to ask for. And I was like, oh, okay, right? Like it was a new experience for me. And the AI tool that he had used summarized, like, here's the things that are most important to the things that are least important. So the tool itself summarized what the tool thought was most important to least important. And then also gave an estimation of what those repairs would cost, which that was really interesting to me because some of them, just in my experience in our local area, the suggested repair cost was way off, either way too high
Or low.
or way too low. So I had a little bit of a conversation about that with, in my experience, that, this particular repair, instead of, the AI tool, and I can't remember specifically an example, but the AI tool had said, let's just say a water heater. So the water heater should be replaced. And the AI tool said, let's say $9,000. Well, we know in our area, it does not cost $9,000 to replace a water heater. So it was an education process of walking through that using the information that was generated from the tool was a good starting point. I think it goes back to like what we just said with these valuation algorithms. It's a good starting point for sure. And then kind of work through that starting point to what reality in our area is.
Well, and I was just going to say, like, while you're talking about that, what popped into my mind was that's a good starting point. But then if you take that list and hand it over to a seller,
Yeah.
and it's an extensive list, how are they going to respond to
Right.
that? So that's the other interesting component here is not only does the buyer have to wrap their mind around this, but also a seller on the other side.
Yeah. Correct.
Where else have you seen AI popping up in your transactions or students or other things?
One way that I like to use it is if a client isn't like they're more of a visual person and they are buying maybe a 20, 30-year-old home that needs some work and they walk into the house and it's like, let's say it's not staged and it's just bare bones. They walk in and they can't see the vision. That's where I've used AI. So I will like upload pictures of the listing and say, hey, like change the floors to this type of wood floor, like this color specifically, and kind of show them like, hey, like this space now could look like this, and then talk about the valuation in terms of like paint costs this, if you do it yourself,
Right.
it's this. New floorings would probably be about this. Average variance for like LVP, luxury vinyl, is maybe this. And being able to like show them like what it could be real time is really, really helpful because it's like, oh wow, like you're right, like you could do this. And it looks so much different. That has been really helpful for me to help get buyers to like just start being more creative about the spaces rather than just like looking at a space like, oh, it's old.
This is super interesting. I'm curious, and I've not seen these photos that are generated by AI after you've applied the changes. Are they usually accurate? Do they look like the real space, or like are there anomalies in those photos that come back? Or
It definitely depends on the tool you use and if it's paid or free. I have a paid version that I would use for that. But yeah, in terms of like adding a fireplace or adding built-ins into a space, it's it's good enough for people to be able to like get the vision to even explore the opportunity, I would say.
When I think like, Christine, you and I in the past have had, for instance, a interior designer come out,
Right.
which seems like an arduous process, especially for somebody that may not be able to visualize something. That's interesting that this might speed up the process for somebody to get a feel for what they might actually, accomplish.
Again, a good starting point, right?
Yes.
So a starting point, and then if they decide to move forward with the property, is when you would maybe bring in the interior designer then to actually dial in the specifics and get more accurate on it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, 'cause I feel like clients don't want to like bug people for some reason. I'm like it's our job, like bug us. We have our book of people, and like we're here to help you.
Right.
But a lot of people don't want to have an interior designer come unless they're under contract. So like being able to like start that conversation at the home has been really, really helpful.
Yeah.
So
I love that. I love that.
I think it's a great way to use it. I have had an experience where clients have used AI to identify risk factors for insurance or other natural disasters, which is interesting because, in this scenario, they plugged in an address and AI generated from whatever sources it has all of these potential risk factors. When we started diving into what it actually meant for this particular house, it was miles away from where the real risk was. But AI doesn't know that.
Right.
In particular, it knows in general, in Colorado, you might experience these types of things, and these are things to be
Right.
aware of. That combined with on many of the real estate portals like Redfin and Zillow right now, there are additional risk factor scores for properties,
Right.
like for fire, for
Flood. Right.
these things that are also not specific to anything like an insurance company would use.
Right.
Have either of you experienced something similar with your
I
clients?
have.
I have too, especially like West Loveland, because I think if there's been a few fires in that area, and I have talked about like what like a natural fire break was, or like what rivers do, and like what major roadways can do for like natural fire breaks, and like education. But I just told people, I'm like, you need to call an agent.
Well, the thing,
That's what I do too.
yeah, exactly. I think the common theme through all of this that we're talking about today is, these tools are maybe a good starting point, and yet we don't see appraisers using them.
No.
We don't see insurance companies using them. We probably don't see.
We don't use them.
We don't use them, right? So if and when AI tools become more perfected, if the experts in that given field are not relying on them to make determinations, then that says something, right? Like, how accurate are they? If they were super accurate, insurance companies would use them.
And I think AI, it uses like your old searches as like kind of like the tone of voice for your future searches. So I feel like maybe someone who's a little more anxious and nervous,
Yeah.
how they were like previous things that they put into the search engine would probably spit out and really skew something forward.
true.
Because like, what is the fire risk of said address?
Yeah.
How risky is the fire for this?
Yes.
Maybe how you word things.
Correct.
Really skews
Yeah.
the information.
And that same client, which is a really great point, that same client also fed in the HOA documents into the AI tool. And I don't know what he fed into it, but he did say that the way he asked it, he was asking it to say, like, what are the egregious things about the HOA, right? Like, what are the really bad things? The way he worded it, he was expecting it to come back with the tone of it to be very serious because of how he put what the question was that he put in about it.
Like very reactive.
Right. So I'm glad you brought that up because from what I'm learning, it is all about like, what is the question you're asking and what is the tone of your question? And it's learned like, okay, you're asking about seriousness, so I need to be serious about my response. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's very much like talking to a person in a lot of ways, right? And so if I ask Blake a question and I say, well, what are the biggest red flags that I need to look out for? Then he's going to respond that way as well. So it's also why I keep this in mind when I talk to AI for different things, productivity things. Being polite is really important because AI remembers.
Yes.
And so if you're always mean and don't think it, and right,
Right.
and, what is it going to do for you in the future? So
Well, the one thing we haven't talked about yet is AI hallucinations.
right, where things are just completely inaccurate.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've touched on it a little bit, right? Like we're saying that they're inaccurate, but I don't know about, this big term now, AI hallucinations, where it's either missing data, the data it's looking at is inaccurate data, or the questions that were asked it weren't asked correctly. And so it literally makes things up.
Yeah.
So,
I think we'll start seeing more and more like AI policies come into play in terms of like just what content of ours was created by AI and what's not, and like having disclaimers. I think that's
I think
coming
that's
into
a good
place.
idea.
A lot of employers and like big employers in town are like requiring like big AI statements, and like you have to agree to like when you're going to use AI, when you're not, and if you do AI, do use AI, it's going to have to be stated. I find nothing else funnier in our business when people are using AI for social media and they cut and paste into like their post and it says like generated by AI.
Right.
And they just forget to take it off. I see that all the time, even in emails.
Yeah.
They'll like ask a question, like respond to this and like this tone, like they'll copy and paste their prompt,
Yeah.
what it says, and
Yeah.
So I have a question in line with this for the two of you. So AI is being used in our industry by individual agents a lot for marketing purposes.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because AI video, for instance, is so good these days. For instance,
scary.
you can.
scary.
I've seen advertisements. I've not done this myself because we have great videographers and don't need to do.
Yes, we do.
But I've seen where there are AI products that will take still images and create a property video out of those still images.
Wow.
And there's a lot of virtual staging that's done by AI these days.
Yeah.
What do you say to people? What should people be cautious about when it comes to what they're seeing in terms of marketing?
I think we always do real staging, right? And there's multiple benefits to doing actual lives, whatever you want to call it. Touching furniture. But physical, thank you. That was right. Real stuff. This is not fake. But so part of that is so that when the person actually comes to visit the property, they're seeing it in that space, right? Because it's one thing to look at it online and virtually staged, and then you show up and it's empty. It doesn't have that same feel as if there's physical furniture there.
Well, and like in line with that, when they go back home to look at the pictures again, they will reference that couch and, oh, that couch was big. I remember seeing it in person.
Right.
My couch was
Right. And when you use virtual staging, what I have noticed is that the scale can be very skewed.
Yeah.
It looks like a big piece of furniture in that picture. That big piece of furniture in reality would never fit in that space, right? So I think there's real risk in potentially misleading photos by using virtual imagery. I don't know what your experience is.
There's one property that the client really requested virtual staging, and we tried it, and it created really weird anomalies like this where I knew that the breakfast bar was very small in this house, but AI put 3 breakfast stools there that would never fit there.
Right.
Would never fit there. And so, the client and I talked about it and decided not to use the virtual staging. But, I think it's important for people to, if they're worried about scale and staging, get in the property and actually see it because we're probably going to see more and more of this come around.
Right.
Yeah. I always just think like you get what you pay for. And a lot of times AI is free and it doesn't look great in terms of like people hiring, like doing their social media or like their newsletters by AI and it's all AI generated. You can tell. And having like good marketing people and like good people who lean into it but don't use it 100% is really, really important.
Yeah, 100%. So AI, big topic here.
Artificial intelligence.
Oh, right, that's right. Artificial intelligence.
That will be good for our SEO. Right, artificial intelligence and real estate.
Exactly.
AI, are you listening?
I know. So scary. Let's all talk about a brand and see if we'll all see it later.
Right.
Ooh.
I need a new pair of shoes. What do you need?
I need new necklace. I don't need anything.
I wish that's the way it worked. It probably won't. But anyways, if it is listening. I'd like a Rolls Royce Cullinan, please. Thank you very much.
So now we're all going to get ads for all of these things.
We'll see.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Thanks for doing that. So what are some tips? People are going to be using this, whether they're using Gemini by Google, they're using ChatGPT, which is everywhere. Zillow just announced a big deal with ChatGPT that listing data will be put into ChatGPT and be searchable. What are general tips for people that you have?
I think to kind of wrap up this topic, it's a couple things, right? Like you get what you pay for. So the accuracy of the tool you're using probably has to do with whether you're using a free tool or a paid tool. And then the other big takeaway for me with all of this is use these tools as a starting point, a quick reference, but lean into experts for the actual determination of whatever area you're trying to look into.
Yeah, I think that's great. What about you, Professor Blake?
I feel like it's the same, especially in our academic setting. I feel like AI is the new Wikipedia. It was the old Wikipedia. Like you didn't source it because it wasn't good.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're kind of going down this path with AI. It's a good place to start, but you definitely need to fact check and verify.
I absolutely agree with both of you, and I'm telling people, please use it as a tool in this search, and then let's talk about it together. Let's go over the results. Let's see what we're really finding here. The other thing that I'm reminding, not only in real estate but everywhere, is that you don't know what's going to be happening with that data that you're giving to AI. For instance, recently, Twitter's Grok just spewed out into Google search a whole bunch of private conversations that people were having with AI. So you don't know where your private conversations with AI are going to go. So just
be mindful. Be mindful. Be mindful.
well, this is great. I'm sure we could talk about this another time if we wanted to. So we'll see.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. We'll see you all next time.